Grocery prices have not stabilized. Anyone telling you they have is not paying attention to the same data that supply chain analysts, agricultural economists, and food security researchers are currently looking at. The pressures driving costs upward are not temporary, and they are not resolving. Climate disruption, fuel costs, geopolitical instability, and logistics networks that were never designed to absorb simultaneous shocks from multiple directions at once are all pushing in the same direction at the same time. When those pressures converge on a just-in-time food system, shelves do not empty gradually, they empty fast. And the gap between the people who will be positioned well when that happens and the people who will not comes down, more than anything else, to whether they planted the right things in the ground before it became urgent. This is not about building a homestead or acquiring specialist knowledge or dedicating your life to growing food. It is about 8 specific crops, chosen because they grow in the conditions most people in North America and Northern Europe actually have, produce meaningful calories and nutrition, store for months without refrigeration, and crucially, give back seeds that can be saved and replanted season after season without any dependence on a supplier. Once these plants are in the ground and the cycle is running, the supply chain becomes largely irrelevant to your household's food security. That is the goal. These are the crops that get you there. Starting at the bottom of the list and working upward, the first crop is zucchini, and the case for it is almost embarrassingly simple. A single well-grown plant produces between 30 and 50 pounds of food in one growing season. That figure comes from University Extension Program data and represents not an exceptional result, but a routine one. The problem most first-time growers encounter with zucchini is not getting enough from it. It is managing the volume it produces without waste. The single most useful adjustment to standard zucchini growing practice is planting into a raised mound of soil rather than into flat ground. Build the mound to about 12 inches in height and 3 feet across and plant the seeds at the top. The purpose is drainage. Zucchini roots are sensitive to standing water, and excess moisture around the base of the stem is the primary cause of the rot and fungal problems that kill plants mid-season. The mound keeps water moving away from the stem and into the surrounding soil where it cannot cause damage. This one adjustment significantly improves survival rates, particularly on clay-heavy ground or in areas with high summer rainfall. What most home growers do not know is that the small, supermarket-sized zucchini is harvested young and is the wrong size for both seed saving and long-term storage. Allowed to grow to full size, sometimes as long as a forearm, the flesh holds its quality well. The seeds inside reach full development, and the fruit can be kept whole in a cool, dry space for 5 to 6 months without refrigeration or preserving. A summer harvest carried through to the following spring. To save seeds, cut the mature fruit open, scoop out and rinse the seeds, and lay them flat to dry for a week before storing in a paper envelope or sealed glass jar. Stored correctly, zucchini seeds remain viable for up to 6 years. The seeds themselves, roasted with oil and salt, provide magnesium, zinc, iron, and healthy fat, a nutritional return that costs nothing beyond the time to prepare them. The 7th position belongs to spaghetti squash, which fills a role that zucchini cannot: serious winter storage. Where zucchini is a summer production crop, spaghetti squash is built for the months when nothing in the garden is producing. A single plant typically yields 5 to 8 squash, each weighing 3 to 5 pounds. Stored in a cool, dark, dry location, they remain perfectly edible for 6 to 8 months without canning, refrigeration, or any processing at all. Harvested in September, the last of them is still good the following March. That is a bridge across the hardest months of the year. The practical mistake most growers make with spaghetti squash is assuming it needs to sprawl. It does not. Like most squash varieties, it is a natural climber. Trained up a trellis, a sturdy fence, or a simple A-frame structure built from timber or bamboo canes, it will support its own weight as the fruit develops and produce a full yield from as little as 2 square feet of ground space. For anyone gardening in a smaller backyard, that distinction matters considerably. One squash contains enough seeds to supply the following season's planting entirely. Scoop, rinse, dry, store. The seeds remain viable for up to 5 years and, roasted, provide omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, and zinc. Potatoes occupy the 6th position for a reason that comes down to arithmetic. 1 pound of potatoes contains roughly 350 calories, plus the carbohydrates needed to support a full day of physical work. They sustained large populations across northern Europe for centuries, not because they were the most nutritious crop available, but because they delivered reliable, dense calories from relatively small plots of ground in a wide range of soil types and cold conditions. The challenge for smaller gardens is space, and the solution to that challenge is the potato tower. Take a 4-foot length of chicken wire and form it into a cylinder roughly 3 feet in diameter. Fill the base with 6 inches of soil mixed with straw or compost. Place 4 to 6 seed potatoes on that layer, and as the plants grow to about 8 inches, add another 6 inches of the mixture, burying the lower growth but leaving the tops exposed. Continue adding layers as the plants climb until the tower reaches 3 to 4 feet in height. The yield from a single tower, depending on variety and final height, runs between 80 and 150 potatoes from a footprint of 3 feet. The chicken wire is reusable season after season. Seed saving requires no technique at all. At harvest, set aside a handful of smaller potatoes, store them somewhere cool and dark through winter, and plant them directly in spring. Each eye develops into a new plant. The cycle continues indefinitely from a single initial purchase. Beans take the 5th position, and the case rests on protein. Dry beans contain between 15 and 20% protein by weight, according to USDA nutritional data, placing them among the most protein-dense plant foods available. They require no livestock, no refrigeration once dried, and store for years in sealed containers in a cool, dry environment. The variety decision matters here. Bush beans, which most home gardeners default to, produce a compact plant that fruits over a short window and then finishes. For a food security garden, climbing varieties, pole beans or runner beans are the better choice. They grow vertically up a trellis or a simple teepee of bamboo canes, produce continuously throughout the season rather than all at once, and yield around 20 pounds of dry beans per 6-foot trellis from just 2 feet of ground space. Sow seeds directly at the base of the support structure after the last frost date. Beans do not transplant well. They climb without much encouragement, tolerate imperfect conditions, and are harvested for dry storage when the pods have turned brown and brittle on the vine. Shell them, ensure they are fully dry, and store in airtight containers. The seed-saving process is identical to harvesting for food. The beans you store for eating are the same ones you plant the following spring. Hold back a generous handful from each harvest, and you never need to purchase seed again. Winter squash, specifically varieties such as butternut or acorn, holds the 4th position and earns it through a combination of caloric value, vitamin content, and storage duration that very few crops match. A single plant produces 4 to 6 squash, weighing 2 to 4 pounds each, with each pound delivering around 200 calories alongside significant quantities of vitamin A, potassium, and fiber. The vitamin A content is the specific reason winter squash belongs on a food security list. Vitamin A deficiency is rare under normal conditions, but becomes a real risk when the diet contracts to grains, legumes, and starchy vegetables, which is precisely what happens when a household is feeding itself from a garden rather than a supermarket. Winter squash prevents that deficiency from developing. Grow it the same way as spaghetti squash, mound planting for drainage, full sun, trained vertically on a trellis. Its culinary range is broad enough to prevent the appetite fatigue that becomes a genuine problem over months of limited variety. It roasts, mashes, incorporates into soups, and bakes into bread. Its natural sweetness provides contrast that purely savory crops cannot offer. Seeds are saved the same way as other squash and remain viable for around 5 years. Tomatoes hold the 3rd position, but not in the form most home gardeners grow them. The standard approach, a few slicing varieties eaten fresh through summer with some canning done in September, captures only part of what tomatoes offer in a food security context. The adjustment that changes the calculation is variety selection. Paste varieties, San Marzano and Amish paste being among the most widely recommended, have denser, lower moisture flesh that preserves better in every form, dried, cooked into sauce, fermented, or canned. A single paste tomato plant produces between 20 and 40 pounds per season. Across several plants, that represents a substantial preservation resource. Full sun, consistent watering at the root rather than overhead, and a support structure are the three non-negotiable requirements. Beyond those, tomatoes are forgiving. The preservation options they offer are more varied than any other crop on this list. Dried without refrigeration, cooked down and canned or frozen, or fermented using methods that extend shelf life and add probiotic value simultaneously. The specific nutritional contribution tomatoes make to this system is vitamin C. Vitamin C deficiency leading to scurvy was historically common in populations relying on stored grain through winter. Tomatoes, whether fresh or preserved as sauce, provide enough to prevent that outcome. They also supply acidity that provides essential contrast to the heaviness of beans, potatoes, and squash over months of repetitive eating. Seed saving from tomatoes uses a simple fermentation process. Squeeze the seeds and surrounding gel from a ripe fruit into a jar of water and leave at room temperature for 2 to 3 days. Surface mold develops, which is the expected result, indicating that the germination-inhibiting gel is breaking down. Rinse thoroughly, dry on a flat surface for a week, and store in a cool, dry location. Seeds remain viable for 4 to 6 years. The second position belongs to oilseed sunflowers, and the reason is fat. The first 6 crops on this list are almost entirely fat-free. Under normal conditions, that is not a problem, because fat comes from cooking oils, dairy, and processed food. In a diet built from homegrown produce, fat becomes scarce in a way that is not immediately obvious, but becomes increasingly significant over time. Fat is required for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, for hormone production, and for the sustained energy output that physical work demands. Without it, even a calorically adequate diet begins to fail, in ways that only become apparent weeks or months into the deficit. A single seed head from a well-grown oilseed sunflower yields close to a pound of seeds. 1 pound of sunflower seeds contains approximately 2,600 calories and around 40 grams of protein according to USDA data. No other crop on this list approaches that ratio of yield to plant count. Growing them is uncomplicated. Full sun, reasonable drainage, plants spaced about 12 inches apart. They reach 6 to 8 feet in height over around 90 days. Harvest when the back of the flower head turns from green to brown and the seeds are plump and fully formed. Cut the head, hang it to finish drying in a ventilated space, then thresh the seeds out by rubbing the head against a hard surface or striking it inside a bucket. No equipment beyond basic hand tools required. Seeds kept in their shells remain viable and nutritious for up to a year in cool, dry storage. The seeds you eat and the seeds you plant are identical, so seed saving requires nothing more than setting aside a portion of the harvest. The top position goes to peas, and the reason they sit above everything else on this list is that they are the only crop here that actively improves the ground. They grow in, which has consequences for every other crop in the system. Peas are a nitrogen-fixing legume. Their roots form a relationship with naturally occurring soil bacteria that draws nitrogen from the atmosphere and deposits it into the surrounding soil in a form that other plants can take up directly. Nitrogen is one of the primary nutrients that repeated cultivation depletes. Under normal conditions, it is replenished through fertilizer, either synthetic or organic. When supply chains are disrupted and fertilizer becomes unavailable or unaffordable, soil nitrogen depletion becomes the limiting factor on how productive a garden can remain over multiple seasons. Growing peas regularly, as a primary crop or as a rotation between heavier feeders, maintains that fertility without any external input. The benefit compounds over years. Beyond the soil improvement, peas are fast, cold-tolerant, and productive in ways the other crops on this list are not. They can be planted as soon as prairie. The ground is workable in early spring, well before the last frost date, which means they begin producing before almost anything else is ready. That timing is significant. The period between winter storage running low and summer crops coming in is the hardest stretch of the year for anyone feeding themselves from a garden. Peas bridge that gap. Shelling peas allowed to mature fully on the vine provide a dry protein source comparable to beans. Snap peas harvested earlier provide fresh eating during those lean weeks. Both types grow vertically, with a 6-foot trellis producing 5 to 10 pounds per season from a 2-foot ground footprint. Allow a portion of pods to dry fully on the vine, shell them out, and store somewhere cool and dry. Pea seeds remain viable for around 3 years. The system these 8 crops form together covers the full range of what a household needs to sustain itself. Zucchini and spaghetti squash handle summer production and winter storage. Potatoes provide the caloric density needed to support physical work from a compact space. Beans and peas supply protein, and, through the nitrogen-fixing work of peas, maintain the soil fertility that keeps the whole system viable over multiple seasons. Winter squash addresses the vitamin and micronutrient gap that starchy crops leave open. Tomatoes contribute vitamin C, preservation flexibility, and the dietary variety that matters more than most people anticipate over extended periods of constrained eating. Sunflowers provide the dietary fat that is otherwise almost entirely absent from a garden-based diet. None of this requires specialist knowledge, expensive equipment, or more ground than a typical backyard provides. All 8 crops produce seeds that can be saved and replanted indefinitely. The investment is time, modest space, and the decision to start before the need becomes obvious, rather than in response to it. Seeds are inexpensive and available now. The window to act ahead of events, rather than in the middle of them, is open. It is not a window that stays open indefinitely, and it does not compress to fit a more convenient schedule.